Hey everybody, today we're going to be installing a Fujitsu heat pump. This is model number AOU36RLXFZH. That's AOU36LXFZH. And that is a 36,000 BTU heat pump from Fujitsu that's specifically designed for cold weather environments. What we're going to be doing first is it's obviously still just being unboxed and on its crate. I'm going to be mounting it here on this wall. So the way that I am mounting it is I bought some brackets off of Amazon. They were made in China. It just says air conditioning bracket. The reason why I chose these ones is because of the design of them. First off, they're aluminum, so they won't rust. But most importantly, because of this shape. Most of them just had an L. They didn't have this lower bracket here. And because of that, I sought out one that had that lower bracket because it's just going to make this thing way stronger. And for me, my concern was if snow gets on it and ice gets on it, the actual weight on this unit is going to be quite a lot, so I want to make sure that I have a very strong bracket, and this certainly will do the trick. So the first thing I'm going to be doing is I'm using this. This is called a lift table that I bought from Harbor Freight. I've had it forever, but if you don't have one, these things are really neat. This whole table lifts up. So what I'm going to do is slide this unit onto that table, and I'm going to lift it up, and then I'm going to bolt my brackets onto my unit first, and then I'm going to push it up where I want it to be onto the wall and lift it up into the particular spot that I'm looking to have it at. It's going to be mounted using some lag bolts. Nothing special. These are galvanized lag bolts you can pick up at the hardware store. I'm going to mount it by screwing some holes and tightening it right down onto that wall. That's our first step. We'll come back once we've finished. Alright guys, so we've got our unit mounted onto the wall, and as you can see, used 4 lag bolts because I was lagging into wood. You'd have to use concrete. If you were lagging into concrete, you'd have to use some concrete screws. I also pulled my wire through. I want to take a second and talk about this. So this wire, this is the one end that I've got that's going to go into my disconnect box. But before we get to that, I want to talk about the appropriate size wire. So if you look at the panel on this air conditioner or any air conditioner, it's going to tell you the amperage. So this it says the minimum circuit ampacity is 31.5. And then it tells me the maximum circuit breaker, 40 amp. So that tells me that I needed a 40 amp circuit breaker inside the house. So you need to get the appropriate one for your box. So if you have a GE box, you're going to get a GE breaker. You need a double pulled breaker because this requires 220. So now let's talk about the appropriate wire size. So you want to go with a solid copper wire, and what I went with was an 8 gauge wire. So if you look up online, there's lots of ampacity amp gauges that tell you what size wire you need. So I knew that I needed a 40 amp rated wire, and I knew that I needed to go approximately 40 feet. So by looking at the chart, I knew that I needed an 8 gauge wire. So this is an 8-2 wire. As you can tell, it's got two wires, and the black and the white, both of those will carry power, and then it's got a ground. So it has no neutral. So again, this is an 8-2, what you need for a 40 amp draw. Next thing you're going to need is this, which is a disconnect box. Don't worry about the fact that it says 60 amp. It means it's up to 60 amp. This doesn't have any breakers in it. Literally the only job is to disconnect the power by doing that. And this is made so that if you ever needed to service the unit, or in case of an emergency, you'd be able to pull this and disconnect all the power to the unit. So how this works is we're going to take this off, disconnect this screw, and then inside there we're going to connect into the 2 different pieces. See if I can show you that. Kind of hard to do with holding the camera. That's really all there is to it. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your positive, your two positive wires, so your black and your white, from the feed, which is going to your box, and you're going to hook them into there utilizing a wire crimp. So that way, I forget the technical name of them, but so that way there's no rubbish here, and I'll show you that in a few minutes once I've done it. Then the other one is going to come out and it's going to go to your unit. Doesn't matter which size you choose. So I'll put all that together and then I'll explain it to you once I've done it. Okay, so we mounted our box. I decided to have my wire come through the back that feeds out. That's all silicone that you see. I just stuck some silicone in there to seal the box off. But this is the feed coming from my electrical panel. You get your black and your white hooked up there, black and your white hooked up over here, and your ground's hooked up to your ground bar. This is what they call an electrical whip. Okay, it comes with, you know, this whole thing, and actually comes with some wires. But I pulled those wires out because they weren't going to be long enough for this particular unit. So what's going to happen is I'm going to hook this into this electrical whip right into there, and then it's actually going to have to, on this unit, it's actually going to have to go all the way up through to here because it actually connects right in here. So the next thing that I'm going to have to do is take this top panel off, and then I will take this panel off. This one comes off right here on the front, and then I'll be able to feed my wire up there, connect in my electrical whip. This electrical whip, not only does it look better, but it helps with waterproofing. So it's just it's the code way to make it work. So anyway, we'll go ahead and pop that panel off, and we'll hook that up, and I'll show you guys what I did. All right, so now as you can see, I've got my electrical whip hooked into the back. I put my cover back on, made sure that this is in the off position, not that I'm going to hook power to it, but just a secondary precaution. I routed the wire up through the middle, and what I will use is zip ties to these little holes and zip tie this up and out of the way, because these coils get really hot. These lines get hot from the coil. I ran it through the zip ties here, zip tied it up here, connected it to the L1 and L2 power supply, and grounded it. While we're in here, these are the units. So for each unit you're going to need 3 wires, and so I've got all the separate wiring for that. You got unit A, B, C, and D. So in this case I'm hooking up 4 heads, each with 9,000 BTUs each. So at this point the electrical for the outside is all done, and I'm going to button this back up, and then I will start on my start on my inside units by connecting those and installing those inside units, and then we'll show you how to do that. Okay, so we're inside and we're getting ready to install our first inside unit. This is a 9,000 BTU unit, so it's pretty small. The first thing you gotta do is there's 2 screws here on the back side that you gotta remove to take this plate off, and this is the actual mounting plate. Inside there's a couple of air filters. Here's your lines. Be careful with these lines. That being said, these lines should be wrapped in springs, so it makes it a little bit, actually this one is not wrapped in a spring. So again, be careful with these. What we're gonna do is we're gonna bend this out carefully, and so it's gonna come straight out. And the reason why we're gonna do that is because we're gonna drill a hole, a 2.5-inch hole, and we're gonna stick those lines right through there. You know, you can exit out of the right. There's a number of different options. The easiest one, based on my experience, is to have it come straight out the wall, and I'm gonna show you that here in just a minute. And the reason for that is because then you can handle all your connections outside. So if you have any leaks or anything like that. Everything's outside. You don't have to keep coming in and out of the house, and it's just easier. The another thing that you need to know is right here is where your electrical connection is going to come from the outside unit to the inside. And the thing to know about that is I recommend that you hook the electrical up inside before you stick it through the hole. It'll just be a lot easier. So you'll have everything set up, your electrical, and then you'll just stick this through the hole. And then you'll be able to, again, do everything from the outside, so you won't be messing with the inside unit. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to mount this bracket. The key thing here, there's two key things here. One, and the very most important, is make sure it is level. Don't eyeball it. Do not eyeball it, because if your ceiling is not level, it will look like it is level, but it won't be. So you have to use a 4-foot level and get this thing perfectly level. If it's not perfectly level, the condensation will not drain properly out of this unit. So this is very important. So we're going to mount this. We're going to make sure we hit studs by using the various holes. And the other thing that's very important is right here, off to this side, is where your 2.5-inch hole is going to get drilled. So obviously you don't want to drill through a stud in the wall. So wherever this lands, make sure that you do not have a stud in the wall, because you don't want to drill through an entire stud and weaken your wall. So that's really the only important thing. Make sure you don't have a stud here, and make sure you hit studs going across as you're mounting it. Okay, so we've got our mounting bracket mounted again. Take a 4-foot level across the top. Make sure that it's perfectly level. Obviously I made sure I hit my studs going up through, so that way I've got a good solid mount, although these things are pretty light, so they don't have to be hooked in with, you know, big lag bolts or anything crazy like that. They're pretty lightweight. Another thing that I want to show you right here is this is going to help you identify where your pipe hole is going to have to be. If you look right here, this is a Fujitsu, and it actually shows you the pipe hole center. Not all of them are going to do this, but a lot of them do. See these arrows? That's telling you to follow those arrows, and where they connect together, that's where the center of your pipe needs to be. So that's exactly where it needs to be. You do have a little bit of wiggle room. I mean, it does slide a little bit, about a 1/2 inch each way. If you were going out this side, you could use those same arrows. Another thing that is really they're just important is you know, make sure that this is in the center. And of course, like I said, we're going to bend those lines, so we're going to go right out the right side. If you were exiting out the left, the reason why it becomes more difficult is because the lines have to come in from the outside, and they'll connect about midway. So you have to make your connections inside, which is hard because you're pulling this unit up and it's kind of in the way. So that's why I like to do all my connections on the outside, because then I'll be able to just drill this hole, hook up my electrical connections, and stick this baby up, and then I've done everything on the inside. Just makes it a lot easier for doing all my connections. Okay, so we pulled our wire through. This wire is a 14 gauge 3 wire, so 14-3. That's the appropriate size for in between the outside unit and the inside unit. So obviously snakes through the back. Here's the connections for the inside. You have to pop this little panel off. Obviously the green is ground. It does not matter what color wires you use for 1, 2, and 3. All that matters is that you use the same colors consistently. So when you hook the 1, 2, and 3 up on the outside unit, they need to be the same colors in here. So I always go red, white, and black. It's just an easy way for me to remember it. The flag colors are red, white, and blue, so I can always remember red, white, and then that leaves the black left. So it's just a simple way for me to remember it in my brain, that that's the way I do it. So all that matters is you use red for number 1 on the outside, white for number 2, and black for number 3 in this case, consistently. So that's the way that we're going to do it. So now I just got to put that panel back on. I pop the front cover off because I find that they just kind of get in the way, and I'll just stick it back on. It comes right off. Just pull it to the side and it pops right out. And then I'm going to stick it back through the hole. I've got my lines already bent out and ready to go. There are springs. I lied to you before. There's springs right here. So that springs just make it so that you're less likely to kink the line off, which is pretty important because you can't have line kinks. Otherwise, you'd have to replace the line. So that's it. Now we're gonna go ahead and stick it up there and stick the lines and the drain hose through the hole, and then we'll be done everything here on this particular unit on the inside, and we'll just be going to the outside. Okay, so we stuck it back up on here on the top. Everything is good. You can see that it sealed nicely. That's another big advantage of mounting it through the outside. If not, you got to cram all those connections behind there, and sometimes it pops the unit out this way, so it doesn't sit completely flush against the wall. And this is a good time for you to stop and clean up your mess like I did. Make the wife happy. You don't want to track all this through the house. And now you can stay right on the outside so you're not bothering her. I've got 3 more of these heads that I'm going to connect to this single unit. I'm not going to obviously show you guys the same steps 4 times. So I'm going to go ahead and install all of my indoor units at this time, and then we'll go to the outside so that way you can see all the outside connections and next steps. All right, so here we are. We're back. We are on the outside now. You can see where all the lines are poking through. So we'll be able to make all of our connections right out here. And I've got a 4th one. It's gonna go all the way up there. So all we're gonna do now is we're gonna pop this panel off here, and then we're gonna take this top piece off by taking all these screws out. Then the one screw down here, we'll be able to slide this off and open it back up. And the reason why we need to do that, of course, is we need to hook up all of our HVAC lines, and we need to hook up all of our wires. In this particular case, it doesn't matter because all of the inside units are the same BTU, so it doesn't matter which one I use for unit A, B, C, or D. Some of them will be numbered 1, 2, 3, or 4. But if you had some inside units that were a higher BTU, then you would want to make sure that you have them hooked to the correct one. So usually your biggest unit will go to A, and so on and so forth. But in this case, these are all 9,000 BTU inside heads. So it doesn't matter which one they're hooked to on the inside. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna pull our HVAC lines, and we'll hook up our first one, and then I'll show you guys the setup. And then of course I'll hook up all the other 3. And then once we've got everything all hooked up on our outside unit, I will again show you that, and then we will move into vacuuming and doing our nitrogen test. Okay, so I connected the first unit. I actually ended up covering it completely with line set covers prior to showing this to you, because I had a hard time making this bend, and the covers were necessary for me to be able to run my lines. It just made it a lot easier for me. But all you got to do is connect the 2 ends from your line set, so it's pretty self-explanatory. I will pop that cover back off when we do a pressure test, so that way I can see the fittings. They hook to the A. In this case, I always hook my first unit to the A. It's labeled right. I don't know if you can see it, but it's right there. A for the first one, and then unit A over here. So all that matters is that you hook the same line set to, if you hook the line set to A, that you hook the associated wire to that inside unit to the same one. So the next one will be B, C, and D, because in this case I've got 4 heads. So that's really that simple. Just make sure the same wire is hooked to the same line set that is running your HVAC to your inside unit. Otherwise, there's nothing more to this. Make sure you seal your holes up, utilizing some spray foam insulation. Don't use the super strong, crazy big gap stuff, because it'll just push your line set out and or push the inside unit out away from the wall. Use the stuff that's made for doors and windows, and it works really well. And that's really all there is to it. So I'll go ahead and install these other 3, and then we'll come back and we'll do our nitrogen test. Okay, so it's the next day now. Worked all night last night, got all my line sets up and installed. I had a lot of run. I had about 125 feet of run. If you have a long amount of run, make sure you read your owner's manual, the installation manual, very closely, because on most units, if you go over 50 feet of line set, then you will have to add refrigerant. In this case, this was set up specifically for 4 zones, and so I was allowed to go up to 164 feet before I had to add any refrigerant. But that being said, you must check your installation manual, because it'll tell you if you need additional refrigerant, and if you do, how much to add per foot, and you'd have to scale it. What I'm about to do now is I've got my nitrogen tank hooked up. A lot of people will skip this step, the do-it-yourselfers. I definitely don't recommend it. I skipped this step when I did my first unit, and it's a really bad idea, because this is how you find leaks. And you might get lucky and you might not have a leak, but chances are you might, and this is the easiest way to get it. So you can go pick up a nitrogen tank from your local welding supply store. They'll have them right in stock. You got to pick yourself up a regulator, so that way you can regulate how much pressure you've got. And then you'll have to obviously have a set of manifold gauges, and this is a micrometer, which I will show you a little later when we do the vacuuming, but it's just on there. So anyways, what you see here is I've opened up the panel. This is where you've got your liquid side and your gas side refrigerant lines. This is how you hook up. So right now I've done nothing to the unit other than open it up, and I've hooked my hoses up to the high and low pressure side, the liquid and gas side, and I'm just going to pressurize the line sets. And what I want to do is I want to open my regulator, and I'm going to pressurize. I want to pressurize to about 500 psi, and that will allow me to get about about 500 psi, 400 to 500 psi. And then what I'm doing is I'm looking for any leaks in any of these fittings. So I'm going to pressurize it, and I'm going to hold it here, and I'm going to leave it. A lot of people say leave it for 24 hours. I say just leave it for a couple of hours. So pressurize it, get to about 500 psi, between 400 and 500, and then wait till the gauges stabilize. It usually takes like 15-20 seconds for the gauges to stabilize, and then just sit and wait. Okay, so that's all you want to do, is just sit and wait, and you want to just see if it drops at all. If it drops at all, then you've got a leak somewhere. So then go get your soap bubbles out, and you're gonna have to go spray all your fittings to find where the leak is. So that's what I'm gonna do now. I'm gonna hit about 500 psi, and I'm going to sit it and leave it for a couple of hours and see if I have any drop whatsoever. Okay, it's been a couple of hours, and I've had absolutely no drop in pressure, so I feel confident that I have no leaks. I wanted to actually let you know that I use this as well. Nylog Blue gasket and thread sealant. It's the only one that is compatible with all refrigerants. It will not contaminate it. Do not use Teflon or anything else to seal yours. This is the correct stuff to use. It will not contaminate 410A refrigerant. So very important. I use it, and instead of going on the threads, it doesn't go just on the threads, it goes on the actual flare itself. So I use it. Some HVAC guys will tell you, it's garbage, don't use it, blah, 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 blah. They're old school. I'm not an HVAC guy. I'm a homeowner. I've read and reviewed, and I've installed a number of these on my own. I use it. I think it's the way to go. I don't have any freaking leaks that way. So I encourage you guys to order. It's like 10 bucks a bottle. So anyway, now I'm going to disconnect it. What you need to do is, once you've disconnected, you need to purge all the air, all the nitrogen out of the system, and then we'll hook up the vacuum and start the vacuum process. You can purge it by just pushing here and opening the valves if you want, or you can disconnect these on the high and low side, and you'll be able to push down on the Schrader valve. You just need to make sure all that nitrogen is bled out of the system before you start vacuuming. So that's what I'm going to do now, and then I'll hook up the vacuum pump and I'll come back. Okay, I lied to you. By pushing this, you won't get the nitrogen out. You have to push both of these. So you'll have to pop the hoses off and release all the air by just pressing down on it, or release all the nitrogen. I keep calling it air. Should only take a few seconds here. But you got to get it all out of the system, because if not, your micron gauge will show a high pressure reading, and you won't be able to draw vacuum, etc., etc. So you got to get it all out of here. Okay, so I've got my vacuum pump hooked up here. Pretty self-explanatory. I hook my red line to the gas side, and then the blue to the liquid side. But at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. Some people will tell you to draw from the high side or the low side. This unit in the installation manual calls for vacuuming from both the high and the low, so that's what I'm going to do. So all you do is you hook it up, turn your pump on. I have a micron gauge. Micron gauge is sensing the amount of moisture in the line. I want this to drop below 500. This thing has only been running for about 30 seconds and it's already dropping extremely fast. And what the micron gauge is doing is it's actually sensing moisture. The reason why this is dropping so fast is because I just used nitrogen in the lines, and nitrogen dries out the lines extremely quick, so it makes the vacuuming process much simpler. What I'm looking for is making sure that this has dropped to -30. Now this gauge is, it's a homeowner gauge, so it's not calibrated. I would have to calibrate it, but I don't really care. I know that it dropped just to -30. If you look at this one, it's not calibrated, so it's higher, but you can calibrate it if you care. In my case, I just use the red side because I know that's fine. Now, it's dropped to -30. I know with this micron level, I don't have any leaks. It's still dropping really quick. If you're not able to drop below 1000, it's consistently not dropping, then that means you have a leak. It means you're sucking air somewhere. If it drops below 1000, you're pretty good. I'd like to see it drop below 500 and stay there. I'm going to leave this vacuum running for a couple of hours, and then I'll come back. Since it's going to be dark when I get back, I'm going to end the video here because this is going to run for a while. All you've got to do at this point is really simple. Okay, you're gonna close your valves off once you've gotten it to the proper level of vacuum, and your micron gauge is at 500 or below. You're going to close these valves off, and then you're going to open this valve. So you're going to take this nut off, you're going to take this nut off, and in there is going to be two Allen keys. You need to open that, and that's going to send the refrigerant through to all your lines. Once you do that, you'll want to purge a little bit of HVAC out, just a tiny amount, just to make sure that there's no air coming through. So what I do is, you can actually just crack it right here. Once you crack it, you're gonna, after you've released the refrigerant, this is the key. Only after the refrigerant is released do you then take these off, and you'll hear some refrigerant will spray out, just a tiny amount. That's fine. So don't break the vacuum. So again, turn the valves off when you're ready. When you're done vacuuming, turn them off. Then you can turn your vacuum pump off, and then you open these valves and then break these. If you break these first before you open the valves, then you just let air back into your system, and so everything that you just did was wasted. So again, turn the valves off, turn the pump off, open the valves, you'll hear the refrigerant come through, and then you're going to disconnect these. A small amount of HVAC refrigerant will come out. That's fine. So check this out. This is the biggest advantage of nitrogen. I'm already below 500. That means my lines are really free of moisture already. But I'm going to let this baby run for a while, because why not? I'm leaving anyways, and I'll end this video here. If you guys liked the video, please do subscribe. Your subscriptions help me. I like to make these videos and trying to build a subscriber base. I'm not an HVAC installer, but I'm a do-it-yourselfer. This saved me thousands of dollars on an installation, and I had a lot of fun doing it actually. So if you like the video, please subscribe. If you get any questions, drop them in the comments. If you get any suggestions, if there's something that I could have done better, drop it in the comments section. I'm learning every single day too. I would appreciate it. Thank you all for watching. Have a good day.